In the world of Game of Thrones, wars are often blamed on kings, dragons, prophecies, and ancient rivalries. But long before the White Walkers marched south or Daenerys Targaryen crossed the Narrow Sea, one man quietly pushed the Seven Kingdoms toward chaos. That man was Petyr Baelish. And the most important weapon he ever used was not an army or a title. It was a lie. Littlefinger was never the strongest man in Westeros. He did not come from a powerful house, he had no legendary sword, and he could not command dragons. What made him dangerous was his understanding of people. He knew how to exploit fear, ambition, grief, and pride. While noble families fought openly for honor and power, Littlefinger moved in the shadows, creating conflicts that others never even realized he started. And at the center of it all was one false story that changed the fate of the realm forever. To understand the lie, you first have to understand who Littlefinger really was. Born into the small and insignificant House Baelish, Petyr grew up surrounded by people far above his social status. During his youth at Riverrun, he fell deeply in love with Catelyn Tully. But Catelyn never truly loved him back. She was promised to Brandon Stark and later married Eddard Stark after Brandon's death. That rejection shaped Littlefinger for the rest of his life. He carried resentment toward the great houses of Westeros, while also becoming obsessed with climbing above them. Instead of gaining power through war, Littlefinger mastered politics and manipulation. By the time the events of Game of Thrones begin, he controls brothels, gathers secrets, and serves on King Robert Baratheon's small council as Master of Coin. To most people he seems harmless. He jokes constantly, avoids direct confrontation, and acts like a man interested only in profit. But beneath that mask is one of the most calculating minds in the Seven Kingdoms. The lie that changed everything involved the attempted murder of Bran Stark. After Bran witnesses Jaime and Cersei Lannister together in Winterfell, Jaime pushes him from the tower window to keep their secret hidden. Bran survives but falls into a coma. Soon after, an assassin tries to kill him with a Valyrian steel dagger. The attempt fails thanks to Bran's direwolf and Catelyn Stark's intervention, but the dagger becomes the key to the coming disaster. When Catelyn secretly travels to King's Landing to investigate, she brings the dagger with her. This is where Littlefinger sees an opportunity. Instead of telling the truth, he claims the dagger once belonged to Tyrion Lannister. He tells Catelyn that Tyrion lost at betting against Jaime during a tournament. It sounds believable enough, especially because distrust between the Starks and Lannisters is already growing. But the story is completely false. That single lie changes everything. Catelyn believes Littlefinger because she once knew him as a boy at Riverrun. Even after all these years, she underestimates how manipulative he has become. Her trust in him leads her to make a critical mistake. When she later encounters Tyrion at an inn, she arrests him for Bran's attempted murder. That decision ignites open hostility between House Stark and House Lannister. From there, the entire realm begins to unravel. Jaime attacks Ned Stark in the streets of King's Landing in retaliation for Tyrion's capture. Tywin Lannister sends his armies into the Riverlands. Political tensions explode into violence. Soon after King Robert dies, Ned Stark discovers the truth about Joffrey's parentage, and the War of the Five Kings begins. Tens of thousands die in a conflict built partly on a false accusation engineered by Littlefinger. What makes this lie so powerful is that it did not create tension from nothing. Littlefinger understood that Westeros was already fragile. The kingdom had been held together by Robert Baratheon's rule, but beneath the surface, old rivalries and hidden secrets were waiting to erupt. He simply pushed the right people in the right direction. Littlefinger's genius was his ability to manipulate emotions. He knew Catelyn's love for her family would cloud her judgment. He knew the Starks viewed themselves as honorable and straightforward, making them vulnerable to deception. And he understood that the Lannisters would respond violently to any threat against their family. He did not need to control every event afterward. He only needed to light the first spark. What is fascinating is that even years later, many characters never fully understand how much damage Littlefinger caused. Tyrion is blamed for a crime he did not commit. Ned Stark walks into a political trap he cannot escape. Robb Stark marches south to war. Entire houses are destroyed. And through it all, Littlefinger keeps rising in power. The chaos created by that lie benefits him enormously. In a stable kingdom, a man like Petyr Baelish would always remain limited by his low birth. But in a realm consumed by war, rules begin to disappear. Alliances shift constantly. Ambitious people can climb higher than ever before. Littlefinger famously believes that chaos is not a pit but a ladder, and the lie about the dagger is one of the first major steps in his climb. As the series progresses, Littlefinger continues using deception to shape the political landscape. He betrays Ned Stark in King's Landing. He manipulates Lisa Arryn into poisoning Jon Arryn. He helps orchestrate the marriage alliance between the Tyrells and the Lannisters. He even plays a role in the death of King Joffrey. But despite all his later schemes, the false accusation against Tyrion remains perhaps his most important move, because it starts the cycle of war that transforms Westeros forever. The brilliance of the storyline is that the lie itself seems small at first. It is not a dramatic battlefield betrayal or a shocking murder. It is simply misinformation whispered during a private conversation. Yet that small moment causes consequences that spread across every corner of the continent. It shows how dangerous information can be in the world of Game of Thrones. Swords and armies matter, but stories can be even deadlier. Littlefinger also represents a different kind of villain in the franchise. Characters like Ramsay Bolton or the Night King bring destruction openly. Littlefinger destroys people quietly. He rarely gets blood on his own hands. Instead, he manipulates others into destroying each other while he watches from the sidelines. That makes him one of the most realistic and unsettling characters in the series. Another reason this lie matters so much is because it reveals the weakness of honorable people in Westeros. Ned Stark and Catelyn Stark are good people by the standards of their world, but they struggle to survive because they assume others share their sense of honesty and loyalty. Littlefinger understands that trust can be weaponized. He uses old friendships and familiar faces to lower people's defenses. By the time they realize the truth, it is already too late. The irony is that Littlefinger's rise eventually leads to his downfall. He spends years manipulating everyone around him, believing he is always the smartest person in the room. But his methods create enemies everywhere. By the final seasons, Sansa Stark and Arya Stark begin to understand how dangerous he truly is. Using the lessons they learned from years of betrayal and survival, they finally expose him at Winterfell. When Littlefinger dies, it feels like the end of an era. The master manipulator who helped plunge Westeros into chaos is finally defeated by the very family he tried to destroy. Yet even after his death, the effects of his actions remain everywhere. The wars, betrayals, and shifting alliances that define Game of Thrones all trace back in some way to the instability he helped create. Looking back at the entire franchise, it becomes clear that the story was never only about dragons or armies. It was also about human ambition and the destructive power of lies. Littlefinger understood that better than anyone else. He realized that if you control what people believe, you can control the decisions they make. And one false claim about a dagger was enough to send the Seven Kingdoms into decades of bloodshed. In many ways, Littlefinger was the perfect architect for the world of Game of Thrones. He was patient, intelligent, and willing to exploit every weakness around him. He did not need to sit on the Iron Throne to shape the future of Westeros. All he needed was the right lie at the right moment. And that is what makes his story so unforgettable. The wars of Westeros were not started only by kings or conquerors. They were also started by whispers in dark rooms, hidden motives, and a man who understood that sometimes the deadliest weapon is a simple lie. Littlefinger spent his entire life turning chaos into opportunity, and for a long time, nobody saw the game he was really playing. But in the end, the lie that helped build his power also became part of the legacy that destroyed him. And this brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, give us a like, share and subscribe for more content like this. Hang around for more updates.